The paradigm that we're in right now with marketing is a quantitative one. There is a lot of emphasis put on testing, attribution, measurements, quantitative value. The problem that I see is that often the marketing that produces the highest impact is very difficult to test. The other major problem that I see is there is a mindset out there that you should test everything, even granular tactical aspects of marketing that really don't matter that much. So for example, changing your call to action button from green to purple. When you're at a very large company and you're dealing with large amounts of users and you have huge economies of scale, then doing these tiny little tests may be worthwhile because every little slight improvement gets amplified across a giant user base. But for most companies, small, medium, and even the smaller of the large companies, it's just really not worth it to test those little granular details. And I would say that's especially true when you're in business to business and you're dealing with more of a one-on-one approach to marketing to prospects. What you really need to do is make sure that you're testing the things that really matter. And when it comes to direct response marketing, lead generation, demand generation, there are basically three things you want to test. Now, at the higher levels of marketing, when you're talking about strategy, there are other things you want to test, such as do we focus on partners more than we focus on end users? But that's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about lead generation. And the three things that you need to test, the three most important things to test before you start getting into those silly little things like the color of your button, is number one, the audience, the targeting. There are different approaches to targeting and you should be doing different variations of them. There are different lists that you could purchase from different brokers. Okay, let's test both of them in LinkedIn ads, see which custom audience produces the better results. Let's test a custom audience versus the native targeting already available within LinkedIn and see which one produces the best results. Second is the offer. This is something that a lot of marketers don't appreciate enough. An offer is something like a free quote, a free consultation, a webinar, a white paper, a free trial. Those are different types of offers, and it is worthwhile to test different offers. And the third thing is the creative. So this is typically where people start with testing, but I would say that it's arguably the least important. The creative is your copywriting, so your headlines. Is your headline a question? Is it a statement? Is it provocative? Is it straightforward? It's the body copy. It's the image that you use. Is it an image of the product? Is it an image of the target customer? Those types of things. Now, what we'll do is we'll go into LinkedIn and I'll show you how you can approach testing these. So here I am in a campaign group, and I can see that I have 3 campaigns within this campaign group. Now, in order to test the audience, which is the first thing that I'm interested in testing, what I'm going to do is take a campaign and I'm going to duplicate it. So by duplicating it, I'm essentially saying that everything is going to remain the same except the one variable that I'm going to change, which is going to be the audience targeting. Now, there are scientific approaches to testing where you only change one variable, and then there's more intuitive approaches to testing where you're a little more agile and you may want to actually change multiple variables at once. So I would say the larger that your company becomes, the more you want to do scientific testing where you're doing true tests to get insights. The smaller you are, the more you need to be just seeing what grabs. Okay, let's test a whole bunch of things very quickly, see whatever pulls, and then let's iterate and build on that. Now, one of the reasons for that is just that you just are never going to get statistical significance when you're very small, because you're dealing with small amounts of data, small amount of customers. It's going to be impossible to do true scientific tests all the time. The other thing is that you need to move quickly when you're small. You don't have enough time to see, okay, what was the impact on customer lifetime value from that test? You're probably not going to be looking at customer lifetime value. You're going to be looking at earlier indicators like click-through rate, leads generated, because that's just the stage that you're at that point. So what I did here was I just created a duplicate of the campaign, and what I'm going to go in and do is just change the audience. So you can see here I'm targeting basically a whole bunch of countries in the world. If you're interested in changing the location, you can go in and change that. Often what you may want to do is change the targeting based on groups versus job titles. Or you might change it from certain types of groups versus another type of group. Or you may want to try seniority levels. So often business-to-business companies focus too high level. They think, okay, it's always going to be the CEO that is interested in our product. Well, okay, why don't we try director level? Industries is probably an even higher level, more meaningful test that you may want to do. Perhaps you don't know, is the dental industry more interested in this, or is it the medical doctor surgeon industry? Is it going to be manufacturers, or is it going to be software providers? If that's not clear to you and your research hasn't really clarified which industry is better for you, then you can use LinkedIn to do that sort of test. So you would just go in here and start making some changes. You just get rid of these and start adding whatever industry you're interested in targeting for the second variant of your campaign. Go to company. I could change the size of the company category. There's all different variables that you could alter here. And I would say that you can, at least initially, make multiple changes to the audience, because that's the key variable you're working on, is the audience overall. Now, you can change multiple variables under the audience, but did changing the audience at a high strategic level have a significant impact on the performance of the advertising? Okay, so you would just go through here and then you would hit save. You're not going to change the bidding or anything because that's going to distort your data. Bidding's something you could test separately. So the audience is possibly the most important thing to test initially, and you're going to be able to see how many leads came in, the cost per lead coming in from one audience versus another, just by looking at the performance of the campaigns. So I can see here, for example, let's change this to all time. Okay, so in this particular campaign group, I actually see that there were no key results coming in, so no leads coming in. So it's very difficult to actually assess performance in this particular campaign group. But I could look at something like clicks, impressions, and other kind of leading indicators that may not necessarily be vanity metrics, but are predictors of where impact could be. So for example, we can see this one had fewer impressions. Now, the second thing that you're going to want to test is the offer. And I think it's highly understated how much you need to test offers. If your goal is to get a conversation with sales, you could market that as a conversation with sales. But what a lot of people do is they market it as a demo or a consultation. But you could get more creative. You could present an offer that is a return on investment session or an insight session or a one-on-one assessment of your capabilities of using this revolutionary new technology. There's all different ways to package offers. And with direct response, you really need to focus on the offer itself. There's empirical evidence to show that by focusing on the offer, your results, and actual financial results in terms of how much revenue you generate, tend to go up the more you focused on the offer. So in this case, what I did was I had two different offers. This one was a free quote, and this one was getting your question answered. And what really surprised me is that I actually generated a lower cost per lead, cost per MQL, from asking people to request pricing than I did from asking people to get their question answered. Which is very counterintuitive, because you would expect that a pricing offer would appeal to people that are lower in the marketing funnel. And people that are lower in the marketing funnel tend to represent a smaller group, and it tends to be a more expensive offer to produce. But that's not what happened. It was actually the case that people preferred to take me up on the harder offer. And that's why it's very meaningful to do these tests, because often we think that offering something like getting your question answered or a free white paper, that these kind of content-based offers are going to be cheaper to produce. In general, the third most important thing to test is the ad creative. So what I might do here is look at the ad variants that I have, and I would click here and create a duplicate so that everything's the same. And all that I'm altering in that case, it's not the offer, it's not the targeting or the audience. All that I'm altering is the creative, which the main thing here would be this image, but it could also be the text above the image. But ideally not changing the description of what the offer is. So for this purpose, I'm just going to edit the current creative. What I would do is I just go in here, start changing the introductory text. So for example, I'm starting with a question. Maybe we want to instead use a different creative strategy. Rather than asking a question, what we might do is tell a story. Or we might use different copywriting frameworks like problem, agitate, solve. There are tons of different copywriting frameworks. You can look them up on the internet, test those ones. You could test video ads versus single image ads to see how those different campaigns perform. The copywriting on the image could be altered. Maybe this is going to be bright red instead of blue. The main thing that I would say is focus on gross changes rather than tiny tactical changes. So one thing that marketers obsess with is email timing, for example. Do we send the email at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday or 9 a.m. on a Saturday? Those are like tiny little tactical changes that don't really matter that much. We want to go for big, bold changes. Okay, so provocative image versus conservative image, for example, would be a big, bold change. And remember, the focus is on impact. Are you able to get a significant, bigger impact? Don't get caught up in the science of testing where it's, let's just isolate one little thing, like just the headline and the image, and test that. You're not at that stage unless you're an extremely large company where tiny little details amplify into big negative or positive impact. So one thing I could do is just delete this image, this ad image, go into Canva here, create a completely different image, upload it here, and then save the changes and launch the campaign. And then I will be able to see which creative outperformed the other. Okay, the last thing that I want to say with respect to testing these three things in LinkedIn is by default, LinkedIn, similar to Facebook, does not do proper A/B testing where they're allocating an equal amount of traffic to one ad variant versus the other. That is not the standard default way. When you create ad variants, LinkedIn is using its artificial intelligence to try to optimize the campaign. It's not relying on you to look evenly at the experiment and say this is the winner or not. If you are interested in doing a proper A/B test, and I would say initially don't bother. I would just create a ton of variants of ads, campaigns, etc., just to get some initial data, see where you're winning, and then build upon that. But as you get more established and get more traction, what you may be interested in doing is getting more insights to help clarify differences. So for example, if you're trying to do research to figure out, okay, what is the positioning of this company, or what is the fundamental value proposition, or you're trying to hone in on a granular subsegment, then you're going to want to do proper A/B testing. So you need to click this little gear icon, and you're going to hit rotate ads evenly. That way, you can be confident that there is a fairly even distribution of traffic to the variants, and then you can start drawing more conclusions, more decisive conclusions about which outperform the other.